Ladies and gentlemen, Liz Cheney will be ousted next week, almost certainly by Trump Republicans. So, how many times does President Trump have to defeat the old school Bush-era Lincoln Project Republicans? Jeb Bush in 2015 and 2016. Now Liz Cheney. How many, what is it about the Bush administration that people long for? You had the same type of recession. In fact, it was, in terms of economics, it was worse because you had to bail out banks. The banks collapsed. And so Bush started the bailouts, and then President Obama got credit for saving our economy by continuing the bailouts. So that economically it was a complete disaster towards the end. There was a housing bubble. They ran on a marriage amendment, so in terms of social issues, they were backwards, especially from today's perspective. And of course, Bush, Cheney, and Rumsfeld's foreign policy was a destabilizing, horrendously short-sighted, and in terms of overall strategy, a miserable failure. Now, the heroism and the courage and the bravery of the men and women we sent to implement our foreign policy, whether it was President Obama or Bush or Trump, that has nothing to do with the despicable people like the Lincoln Project, like the other think tanks and neoconservatives who pushed for endless regime changes and interventions and a foreign policy that has never worked. They did not learn the lessons of Vietnam. They didn't learn the lessons of the French in Vietnam. They didn't learn the lessons of the Russians in Afghanistan. They didn't learn the lessons of history, whether it's Napoleon or the 1930s and 1940s Germans. There are certain places that you don't want to go, or certain things you don't want to do militarily, because there's no way for your military. It doesn't matter how powerful or large your military is. There are certain things you just cannot achieve. And you have establishment Democrats voting alongside, whether it's Kerry, and he should have learned the lessons, whether it's Kerry or McCain, or not Romney, or Clinton, or Biden, Bush, Cheney, and Rumsfeld. You had Jeb Bush, who couldn't even disavow his brother's foreign policy. And then you have people who are so ignorant and so lacking of awareness and so unable to put historical perspective or see historical perspective within their evaluation of today's politics. Well, Bush was bad, but Trump is worse. Well, you must not think then endless counterinsurgency conflicts, which is a type of military endeavor where you're trying to win the hearts and minds of people who oftentimes do not want you there. Some people do, and some people don't. Some factions do, and some factions do not. The problem is, we've never had, and there has never been in history, there has never been in history a major successful counterinsurgency conflict by a major world power that has been a stunning success, that has achieved long-term political victory for the country that is trying to. They'll point to one, and I don't want to get lost in the weeds here, but then that country eventually became independent. So it's like there's never been a successful type of military intervention that can point to success to warrant and justify the establishment foreign policy that President Obama engaged in within Libya, which was a colossal failure that turned that country into a failed state, worse than anything Trump did ever. And it's like President Trump presided over foreign policy achievements. Hit subscribe to this channel right now. But you look at Cheney in terms of historical context. She voted alongside President Trump 90% of the time, yet she continually sides with Democrats in trying to, and it's not just her, it's Romney, it's Sass. There's about 5 or 6 or 7 very vocal, never Trumpers. When 2022 rolls around, you're going to have Trump Republicans take over the House. Hopefully you'll have a Republican Senate. I say this not because I like the Republican Party. I like them better than Democrats. But because you want a Trump Republican Party. You want a populist political party. We got to have, you in this day and age, you need to have one political party against never-ending counterinsurgency conflicts. You need to have one political party who will engage in tariffs if that needs to happen and rip apart the TPP. You need to have one political party who will sign prison reform legislation without doing everything that Democrats like. Democrats talk about systemic issues. They're the ones who helped create these systemic issues. Biden wrote the crime bill with the 100-to-1 sentencing disparity. But again, you're talking about, it's like speaking with morally superior, yet oftentimes apoplectic, but always morally superior Democrats is like explaining to them their own sins and the fact that they've engaged in worse behavior than Trump. It's like trying to teach physics to an amoeba. It's not going to ever happen. They will never admit to their failures, to their hypocrisy, to their duplicity. They're the ones who allow private servers with top secret intel. So Clinton had top secret intel on private servers. And James Comey, the head of the FBI, said, we couldn't find intent. And they're still going after Trump now for obstructing an investigation that should never have been started based on intelligence operative lies. And we've seen from the Bay of Pigs to the Gulf of Tonkin to WMD, when have these clandestine, shadowy organizations been right on anything grandiose? Do we need them? Yes, we need them. I'm not like the left, defund, and well, you could defund actually, but, abolish them. No, you do need them, but you don't need them within domestic politics. And, the FBI is important because of the most wanted list. Other, the counterintelligence, people like Peter Strzok or others, they must never be allowed by the Supreme Court or by the United States government to go after incoming political candidates. What Democrats have done is they've made a deal with the devil. And they can't fathom a moment in history when political operatives will slither towards the Republican Party. But that's eventually going to happen. Because they were part of the Republican Party during the Bush years. Then they slithered to the Democratic Party. What makes anyone who understands anything about history think that people like Clapper and Brennan and Comey won't simply go back to the Republican? I think all three of them, aside from Brennan, Comey's a Republican. But the notion that these are good Republicans who would never stand against Trump. Trump is against regime changes. He's against never-ending counterinsurgency conflicts. He doesn't revere these organizations. He hasn't utilized these organizations to go after political opponents. He hasn't utilized the Justice Department to go after political opponents. He should never have been investigated, ever. There was a dossier purchased against him. He didn't purchase a dossier against anyone else. They're going after him now they're going after William Barr for not indicting Trump on obstructing an investigation that was baseless. Not one person was influenced by Facebook ads. But again, all of this Liz Cheney represents. Her father represents. All of this is what Trump opposes. I'll take the mean tweets. They talk about saving democracy. It's Trump who saved democracy. He saved us from 4 years of Clinton and never-ending counterinsurgency conflicts. That is a far greater achievement than anything Democrats have done the past 4 years. In addition to the fact that on May 1st, 2021, President Trump negotiated a deal to get us out of the mess and the dilemmas, the moral dilemmas that Bush, Cheney, Rumsfeld, Kerry, Clinton, Biden got us into. Give me your thoughts below. Cheney's going to be out next week, and it'll be hopefully at least Stefanik. Give me your thoughts.